Good evening, and welcome to the Montgomery County Historic Preservation Office's Historic Preservation Tax Credit Workshop. My name is Rebecca Ballo, and I'm the supervisor for the Historic Preservation section. We are joined tonight by Michael Kine, our Historic Preservation Tax Credit Coordinator, who will be giving a presentation this evening, and then answering a moderated Q&A with everybody who's joining us tonight. We also have Casey Roan and Kevin Manarola from the Historic Preservation Office who will be helping with the Q&A and with the tech support. A few business items before we get started. So we have about an hour here tonight. Staff will be giving a brief PowerPoint presentation, about 10 minutes long, going through all of the technical requirements of the tax credit program, showing you some examples from the county. And then we also have our live event Q&A. So this is not the type of format where people will turn their video on and off or have the audio. If you have questions as we go through, please type them into the Q&A, and then Casey will publish them for everybody to see, what everybody else is asking. And then we will answer those questions live at the conclusion of the PowerPoint. Again, we have about an hour tonight, so we have plenty of time to get to everybody's questions. And thank you very much for joining us. So now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Michael Kine. Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I just want to make sure everyone can hear me. I can
Yes.
Okay,
we can hear you, Michael.
Yes,
okay,
we can hear you.
Okay, so as Rebecca said, I'm going to give a presentation. It's pretty brief, no more than 10 minutes long. If you've been to any of our open house meetings before, this is all pretty familiar to you. And this is just an introduction to the county's historic preservation tax credits. And I will start that now. So what is the Montgomery County Historic Preservation Tax Credit? It's a 25% tax credit of documented expenses for exterior maintenance, restoration, or preservation work exceeding $1,000. And that credit is applied against county property taxes.
Michael, if I could stop you for just 1 second. We don't
Sure.
have your slides. Oh, there they are. Okay, great.
Okay, and the slides are up now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll continue. So the eligibility requirements for the tax credit: the work must be exterior in nature only. Interior work is not eligible for the county's tax credit. The work must be performed by a licensed contractor. The work must be certified by the Historic Preservation Commission as contributing to the restoration or preservation of sites and districts on the master plan for historic preservation. And work requiring a HOP or a historic area work permit must have received approval from the HPC. Ordinary maintenance, which does not require a HOP, those expenses must exceed $1,000. So what's allowed? These are some examples, though this list is by no means exhaustive. Exterior painting, window rehabilitation, roof repairs or in-kind replacement, repairing architectural trim or ornamentation, repairing outbuildings such as garages, original siding rehabilitation, repointing brick or stone foundations or chimneys, and even professional services such as design fees and structural reports. And some examples of what's not allowed: new construction or a new addition, repaving driveways or any hardscaping for that matter, work requiring an approved HOP completed without the approval of the HPC, interior work, the value of labor unless performed by a licensed contractor, landscaping, repairing mechanical equipment, and tool and equipment purchases. The application requirements: Step 1, complete the application and receipts transmittal form. Step 2, complete a description of the work that was done, which includes a general property description, an explanation of what rehabilitation or maintenance problems you are trying to resolve, proof of payment, which includes itemized receipts that are clearly marked and separated from any non-eligible expenses, and then finally, before and after photographs. And we do have an online application now. We've had that for the last 2 or 3 years, I believe, and it can be filled out online and submitted electronically. In the electronic submissions, we say here they are preferred, and we by far we receive most of our applications electronically now, and they are greatly preferred. They make things easier for all of us. Though if there are some limitations, we will still accept a paper application. And those applications can be found on our website. The timing and deadlines. The credit is applied to the county property taxes the year after the work is completed. Applications are due to the Historic Preservation Office on April 1st, following the year in which the work was completed. Applications are reviewed by the HPC during the spring and summer of that calendar year. The approved tax credits are applied to tax bills issued to the property owners later in the year. An unused portion of the credit can be carried over for up to 5 years. And here's an example. An owner of a county designated historic property completes a painting project in October 2020. That property owner submits a complete historic preservation tax credit application by the deadline of April 1st, 2021. Staff reviews the application and recommends approval of all eligible expenses to the HPC. The HPC agrees with staff's recommendations, and the application is forwarded to the County Department of Finance at the conclusion of the tax credit review period, which this year we hope to expedite that process quite a bit and actually have those over to the Department of Finance probably by late spring, early summer. And the County Department of Finance adjusts the applicant's 2021 property taxes for 25% of the eligible expenses in accordance with the HPC's decision. Any unused portion of the tax credit is carried over, again, for up to 5 years. And that would conclude my presentation. And if you need more information, we do have quite a few links and resources on our website. The address here is here on our final slide. And I think with that, I can turn it back over to our production team and we can begin taking our questions from the audience.
Thank you, Michael. So we do have some questions here in the chat that I'm happy to read out. So the first, well, will the PowerPoint presentations be made available for downloading? So I'll type this in the chat and I'll tell everybody to, yes, we will post the PowerPoint on the HP website at the conclusion of the meeting. And then we also have, we have a longer question. Michael, I'll read this out to you. And so everybody has the benefit of hearing it, and then if you can answer as well. So somebody is asking, my specific question is, does the tax credit on expenditures in a given year roll over into future years if the benefit exceeds the current year's property taxes? As an example, if I spend $100,000 in approved renovations in year 2020, I would be eligible for a tax credit of $25,000. If the property tax on my property is $10,000 per year, would the $25,000 credit reduce my current year property tax to zero and give me a credit of $15,000 to apply to my property tax in future years until the credit is exhausted? Michael, can you please answer this question?
Yes, I can. And the attendee who asked that question actually answered their own question very well. Actually, that's exactly how it would happen. If you spent $100,000 in eligible expenses, as you said, you would be eligible for $25,000 in tax credits. If your property taxes were only $10,000 the first year you were eligible, that would be zeroed out, and you would have $15,000 to carry over. And in the exact example you gave, you would zero out the following year as well, and then you would owe $5,000 that third year.
Casey, I see there are other questions in the chat. Could you read one of those, the next one out for us, please?
Sure, I would be happy to do that. So our next question is, if it was determined that the project was a replacement in kind and Montgomery Planning, we determined that it didn't require a historic area work permit, would that work be eligible for a tax credit?
Yes, it would. That would qualify as routine maintenance, with the only requirement being that it would have to exceed $1,000, meet or exceed $1,000. So yes, it would as routine maintenance. Now, we do ask that you still contact our office just to make sure that you don't need a HOP, or now something that we recently introduced, staff level approval. And we can even then provide you with an email or a written letter stating that the work does not require any further review by the HPC, which we would then ask you to submit with your application, which makes it easier for us in the review. We know we've seen this before, and we know that we've told you you're okay with everything, you've checked all the boxes, and you definitely did not require a HOP. So we do ask that you reach out to us, but yes, you would be eligible for routine maintenance.
Okay, that's great. So our next question, and thanks, everybody's submitting a lot of questions now, so please feel free to keep doing that. Even, specific questions about your work and your project are welcome here. We're here to answer those for you. So our next question is April 1st a hard deadline for submitting your application for work done the previous year? What happens if it's late, or what if you're missing something when you submit the application? Will you have an opportunity to correct that?
So April 1st is a hard deadline in accordance with the code that the code that's related to the tax credit. It is a hard deadline to get the application in. If you're missing information, or if I require additional information to make a determination on eligibility, I will contact you. So if you're missing a receipt, perhaps by accident, or as I said, I just need some sort of additional information, additional photographs or something like that, I can contact you later for that information when I'm conducting the review of your application. But as far as getting the cover sheet, getting your application in the queue, April 1st is a hard deadline. Now, I will say that there are current extenuating circumstances, as we're all aware. Last year, we were very generous with the extension of that deadline because of everything that was happening with the ongoing crisis. And there probably will be some leniency this year as well, until everything gets back to normal. But per the code, April 1st is a hard deadline to get that cover sheet in.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that one. So our next question is from somebody who looks like they want to do some of this work themselves. So their question is, if I paint the exterior of my house myself, can I then submit the cost for materials I use, like wood restoration products for their 103-year-old siding, sandpaper, primer, paint, that sort of thing? They know that their labor isn't eligible. Well, what about materials that they can document the expense for with receipts? And if that's not the case, can you please explain why that wouldn't be eligible?
For an example such as painting, we would certainly consider that tax credit. You would have to break out the expenses, you would have to separate the materials, and you would have to ensure that you're not, it's a situation where, as I said in the presentation, tools aren't eligible, so you'd have to be very careful with the breakdown of your expenses. Since you don't have a contractor helping you with that, you would need to break out the paint from the paint brushes, things like that. Other examples are a little more complicated when they require work that could have an impact to the historic resource in many ways. Work that's done incorrectly to mortar, for example, could damage the property. Work that's done incorrectly to a foundation could cause water infiltration, which further damages the property. So it's sort of case by case, but an example such as painting, we certainly would consider that for the tax credit. Hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I think so. We've had a similar question, which I think you've answered. Hopefully, if this was your question and you'd like more information, please feel free to submit it again. But someone else has asked, can you submit only the material expenses or only material expenses when you also submit labor? So I think you've addressed that with our last question, but for person who submitted that, feel free to ask more if you need to. So the next question after this is how does our tax credit process work with local municipalities that have their own historic preservation commission? Does that commission review the application and approve it first, or how is that coordinated with our review and processing?
Yes, so for example, the city of Rockville, their commission would review their applications. but similar to ours, they're forwarded over to the county's Department of Finance, who will adjust the property tax bills. But I've never seen, and there's no reason for me to look at a property in Rockville because they're not administered by our organization. But it's the same process, same eligibility requirements, same list of eligible work and ineligible work, and ultimately applied to the tax credits by the County Department of Finance. So most of the things I'm going through here tonight are relevant to those municipalities.
Great, thank you. So we have a couple more project-specific questions. We've had someone who has asked if exterior repointing of brick requires prior approval.
Yes, it does, and it's I kind of addressed that earlier. That's because if the mortar mixture is not correct, if it's too hard, it can damage the brick much more than any issue that you're currently trying to address with the repointing. And we want to ensure that that doesn't happen. So you would need to contact us first. We would ask you to contact us first before you begin that work. You can tell us how you're going to perform the work and how you're going to ensure that the mortar mixture is correct. And then we can write a letter approving the work, and you can submit that with your application later for the tax credit.
Okay, great, thank you. So here's a sort of similar question. Would a regrading and drainage project to address basement water intrusion be eligible for the tax credit?
Yes, generally speaking, those are a case-by-case basis. Significant regrading that's also being done perhaps to accommodate a new addition, we would take a harder look at to ensure that it actually is addressing some standing water issues as well. But I think even in our list of eligible work that's on the website, we mentioned French drains and regrading that's done to address water issues.
Great, thanks for that. So next question, this person has a stone retaining wall on their property that is not part of the house, but it is on the property and original to the house. Would the cost to have a contractor repair by tuck pointing my stone retaining wall be allowed for this credit?
Yes, and this is actually one of the best questions so far, and I'll tell you why. I mentioned in the presentation that hardscaping in general is not eligible, and that would apply to driveways, patios, retaining walls, site walls, things like that. However, if you can demonstrate that the wall is original or historic, although it's not part of the house, we would certainly consider that tax credit because it's an original feature. So that's a very good question. We would ask you to somehow demonstrate that it's original, if possible. At least mention it in your narrative and provide a lot of photographs so we can make our own judgments about that. But yeah, the example that's been given, that would be eligible for the tax credit.
Okay, great. How about the next question? Somebody did some work 2 years ago and replaced their windows. Could they still apply for the credit this year?
Technically, they've missed the deadline. We try to be generous for work that is done correctly to address maintenance and preservation issues, particularly windows, which are always a character-defining feature. What we would ask in that situation is for the applicant to go ahead and submit their materials, submit their application, be upfront about the dates. Let us take a look at it as a team and judge whether we could consider that. But technically, they've missed a deadline, but we would be willing to take a look at it.
Okay, great. That's very nice. So our next question is about a tax question, which I know we say we can't give tax advice per se, but so their question is, does this tax credit affect or need to be reported in my state tax filings?
I'm not going to attempt to address that. I honestly don't know the answer to that. As you said, we don't give out tax advice. Your tax accountant is who you should ask about that, but I just really have no idea how that's handled with their state taxes. If anyone here on the team, if Rebecca, she's still here in the meeting, if she's dealt with that before, maybe she can speak up, but personally, I have no idea how that's handled with the state taxes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think that's our best advice that we can give on that one. So next question here. We've had the same roofer come out multiple times to address water intrusion and broken slates. Can these individual receipts be combined into one entry that exceeds $1,000, even though some of them individually were less than $1,000?
Yes, you would just, in your application, you would describe the situation in your narrative, and you would lump it, in the example you've given, you would lump it all under roof repair. And you would explain that you've undertaken these multiple steps to address issues with your roofing. And again, you know, per our code, it should all have occurred within one given year, in this case, within the year 2020. But yes, you can lump all of those repairs and all those expenses together under roof repairs and maintenance.
Okay, and how about if there were different sorts of projects included? The next person has asked, can they combine costs for different things, painting, chimney relining, replacing the roof in order to meet that cost threshold?
Yes, they can. Yeah, that's what we often see. Someone has, for instance, the majority of applications I review every year are for painting with minor carpentry repairs. So some instances of wood rot on the siding or window sills, for instance, that have been repaired during the process of painting the house. So yes, you can combine all the expenses to meet that $1,000 threshold.
Great. Thank you. So our next question here from Zach, he says he's a contractor and is interested in rehabbing a historic property to eventually become his primary residence. Is that work still eligible under his MIHC license?
Well, he's a licensed contractor in the state of Maryland. If he performs the work, I'm guessing it's consistent with the code, although that is a very unique circumstance, but I think that it would per the code, yes.
Great, thanks. And Zach, if you have any further questions about us, feel free to reach back out to us about that. So next question is, can you just talk a little bit more about the HOP process generally?
Sure. So the historic area work permit application is required for any exterior work at a county designated master plan site or historic district. Now, so we always ask that you contact our office when you're going to perform any type of exterior work, just to ensure that you do not need a HOP. If it's routine maintenance or in-kind work, we can write a letter or an email stating that you do not need any further review from staff or the HPC. If it results in a visual change, or as our code would say, a material effect, you would be required to submit a formal HOP application to be reviewed by the HPC. That requires, some certain timing and for noticing and for the staff report to be written and presented to the HPC. So generally a 3-week, give or take, turnaround for those applications. I mentioned earlier that we do have a new process in place, which is the staff level, the administrative approval. We've just introduced this very, very recently, and I'm not sure if Rebecca wants to maybe provide a greater overview of that. But that does expedite the process quite a bit. Work that we can determine is eligible for that administrative review, which generally it's work that does not create a significant visual change. We can create that or write that expedited report and approval, and that work is also eligible for the tax credit. And again, I'll turn it over to Rebecca if she wants to talk about that new process at all, but that's certainly a different topic.
Sure, I can answer just one or two questions related to that. Thanks, Kevin. So as Michael stated, there was recently a change to the administrative regulations for the HPC and the HOP process. So there are certain categories of work that do not require a public hearing in front of the HPC. As Michael said, this is limited to a very discrete category of work items that result in the most minimal of visual changes to the property, and these work items are routinely approved out. Staff now has the authority to review and administratively approve those historic area work permits within 5 business days of receiving a complete application. There's more information available about that on the main historic preservation website. An example of that would be a 4-foot high wood picket fence. A work item that is routinely approved out in the master plan historic districts and at master plan historic sites. That's a work item that if we received a completed application would be approved out at the staff level within 5 days and would not require a full public hearing in front of the HPC and that 3-week turnaround time. I'll say too, though, it's not a 3-week turnaround time for people to have, general questions answered. We have a general inbox, the staff contact information, Michael's information, mine, Casey, Dan Brugert, our other regulatory planner, is available on our website, and we return emails and inquiries from the public within 24 hours related to all your projects that you have. So if you ever have a question about whether or not something you're thinking about would qualify for a tax credit, if you need a historic area work permit, if you're just not sure, even if you're looking at purchasing a property and are thinking about doing some work on it, please get in touch with us and we will get back in touch with you very, very quickly. Casey, I'll turn it back to you to keep going through our Q&A. And thank you, everybody, for these great questions. This is really great. Casey, over to you.
Sure. Yeah, please keep submitting your questions. I think these are really helpful for other folks to hear. So our next question, this individual has a historic house that used to have a back porch, which disappeared years ago. If they get approval to rebuild the porch, would that be covered by the tax credit?
It would if it was truly historic restoration. So you would need to document what the previous porch looked like. So you would need photographs and any sort of documentation you have. If you have plans of the original porch, that would be helpful. But certainly photographs, and you would need to match the details as closely as possible, and you would need to construct it from traditional materials. So if it was a historic porch, it would have been wood, so it would have to be constructed out of wood for the new porch. But yes, if it's a true restoration of a missing historic feature, that is eligible for the tax credit.
Great. So next question here. I'm looking at replacing an asphalt drive with a cobblestone drive. One is non-pervious and the new one would be pervious. They are a designated historic house.
So unfortunately, as I said earlier, hardscaping in general, patios, driveways, paving, walkways aren't eligible for the tax credit unless it's can be documented as a historic feature. The example being the retaining wall that we heard earlier. It seems that maybe that applicant can demonstrate that the wall is historic, and then we would consider the tax credit. If it's a new driveway or just replacing the existing driveway, those are subject to cyclical maintenance anyway, so because they're not part of the historic house, we don't consider those for the tax credit.
Great, thank you. Next question, is the installation of storm windows and screens eligible for the credit?
Oh yes, storm windows and screens are eligible for the credit for sure. We highly encourage the installation of storm windows and screens. We often see that they are the #1 deterrent to window replacement. So anytime someone comes to us and they say, we have historic windows, we're not too happy with our energy retention, and they say, so we want to install storm windows, we give it 2 thumbs up, and we do offer the tax credit for that work.
Great. So this is really our last question that's been submitted so far. So if you still have something on your mind, now's the time to type it into the chat here. So the question is, does the county maintain a list of MIHC approved contractors?
I would turn this over maybe to Kevin Manarola, our administrative assistant, who I believe is on the call, if he can just chime in even with his audio here and provide an answer for that. I know that we did at one time keep a list of contractors on our website, but I'm not entirely sure how up to date that is and what the process is of being added to that list. So I'll turn it over to Kevin and he can provide some information perhaps.
I can confirm that there is a list on our website that has all contractors for all types. It hasn't been vetted for currency in quite some time, but anyone can request to be on it, and it is simply a listing in alphabetical order per specialty. Michael?
Thanks, Kevin.
Kevin, I'm sorry, Michael, I'm going to just let everybody know as well. This is Rebecca. I did drop a link into the chat to a website that the county does maintain about how to choose a licensed contractor. The county's website talks about knowing your rights, asking the right kinds of questions of your contractor, and doing the homework to research that a contractor may be right for you. Just because somebody is a master carpenter, for example, we recommend that people look for contractors that have specific experience dealing with historic properties and in historic districts. They don't have to have necessarily worked in all of the historic districts, or if someone has done a lot of work in Tacoma Park, for example, they can be just as qualified to do the work in the Garrett Park district. But historic properties have unique maintenance needs, often have unique materials, not just copper, but sometimes zinc, or the wood is much older growth hardwood than some of the pine that other contractors are used to seeing on properties that are not quite so old. So we do recommend that people do their homework. And as Michael and Kevin had mentioned as well, on the Historic Preservation website, we did keep a list of contractors that have done work specifically on historic properties, and that have successfully completed projects within the historic districts. I would recommend that people, look to the Better Business Bureau, look on the county's website that I put the link in the chat, and then also look to the state office as well that licenses contractors, to see if there are any complaints against certain contractors and to see who's out there doing the work. I'd also recommend to talk to your neighbors, see on the listservs, who's done some work that you really admire, something that really looks good. I find that often word of mouth within the neighborhoods about really skilled carpenters in particular is often, a really good way to go. So that's all I have for that. I will turn it back over to Casey.
Thank you. And Rebecca, this next one is not a question, but it is a compliment to you. We've had Thomas Shend compliment you on your great leadership and your responsiveness to questions so far. So for anyone else out there who wants to reach out to us, we're here to help. Rebecca's here to help. We're all here to help. So please be in touch. So our next question here, we've had a few more come in. Once your historic preservation project is approved, what tax form do you use to submit the tax credit?
So if I can dissect that question a bit, I think the question is simply, how do I submit my historic preservation tax credit application to the county? So you would visit the website, our website, specifically our page for the historic preservation tax credits, and there you can find the download for the application. You can fill it out electronically and then submit that back to us via email, and then email us separately your supporting documents. So scans of your receipts and your photographs. And then again, the deadline for that's April 1st. And I think having it all available electronically makes it much easier for most of us. You can just visit that link, quickly download the application, fill it out in your PDF editor, and then send it back to us.
Thanks, Michael. And if I can ask a clarifying question, maybe this is what they were getting at as well. After they've submitted the application to us, is there any other paperwork that's needed to actually receive the credit, or is the processing of that done on our end?
Okay, yes, good question. So the processing of that is done entirely on our end. You will receive a letter indicating that we've received your application. And then once the review is complete, the review period, you will receive a letter stating if your application was approved. entirely, in part, or perhaps denied. And then once we take the applications to the HPC and they approve staff's recommendations, we transfer those credits, again, at the end of the review period, over to the Department of Finance, and they take our recommendations. If they feel the need to, they can take a second look at some of those applications, but generally they just take those applications and adjust the property taxes accordingly. So there's nothing else required from the applicant once they submit their application to us, unless we need more information, which we'll let them know.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's very helpful. So the next question here is the installation of exterior lighting eligible for the tax credit? It would not be ornamental lighting, but rather illuminating a dark walkway and a house number.
Unfortunately, that would not be eligible for the tax credit. The tax credit is aimed at preservation of and perhaps restoration of missing features, but generally preservation of the historic house and or routine maintenance that aids in that preservation. But installation of new lighting, much like hardscaping, and even another example would be fencing. Since Rebecca gave the fencing example earlier for the expedited approvals, fencing would not be eligible either. So to answer the question, lighting would not.
Okay, great. Thank you. So our next question here is, what if the windows are beyond repair and need replacing? Window manufacturers are getting better at creating period windows. Can I provide specs of the windows I would like to use for your review?
Well, that's a tricky question, and that one would certainly have to go before the HPC before we ever would consider that for a tax credit. I mentioned earlier that windows are one of the most character-defining features of most historic houses. So we do everything within our ability to preserve those windows. There are certain thresholds where you can demonstrate that the windows are beyond repair, though they are, in my opinion, stringent for a reason. So you need to demonstrate, would need to provide a window survey with the with photographs and the conditions assessment for every window, and then you would need to demonstrate that the proposed new windows match in material and dimension, both the dimension of the overall unit and the individual components, same Muntin profiles, same dimensions of the stiles and the rails and the meeting rails. So window replacement is a stringent process, but again, that's because windows are a very significant character-defining feature of these historic houses. So we do our best to preserve those.
Great, thank you.
Let me add a little piece to that. If we do determine that the windows were beyond repair, if we can make that determination and the HPC approves the window replacement, generally, yes, that would be eligible for the credit.
Okay, so it sounds like to be determined
yes,
on a case-by-case basis with that one. Okay, great. So here we are at again, this is the last question we have submitted. So if you are holding on to any questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat now. So the final question we have here is sort of more of a comment, but this person spent all last year trying to find a stonemason who understands lime mortar for restoring a historic stone retaining wall, and they are frustrated and don't know where else to look. And maybe, Michael, you could speak to this. Maybe we've had some similar projects. I would encourage this person to reach out to our office, and we could potentially help find a resource for them. But Michael, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's the perfect answer. I think that's exactly what they should do. Reach out to us, and as a team, we can come together to come up with a list that we can provide you. There are certainly many skilled masons in the county that have worked on other projects, and we're familiar with some of those, so we can provide a list. But yeah, they're handling the project correctly and ensuring that they find a contractor who can match that mortar mixture.
That's great. So once again, final call for questions here. We don't have any more in the queue right now, but if you're typing, go ahead and finish up your last questions here. Otherwise, I guess I'll turn it over to Michael, Rebecca, whoever wants to give a few close. Oh, we've had one other question come in while I'm talking. Great. So here, this person asks, I have an original brick patio on a historic house that needs new caulking. Would that be eligible for the credit?
Yes, much like the original retaining wall example we heard earlier, if you can demonstrate that this is an historic feature, providing photographs or any sort of documentation you have that would assist us in making that determination or concurring with that determination, that would be eligible because it's an original feature. So the repairs, the maintenance would be eligible for the tax credit.
Thank you. So we're just having some words of thanks coming in here. No more questions at the moment, so I'll turn it over. Michael, Rebecca, do you want to close us out here tonight?
Sure, I'm happy to. Thank you, Kevin, Casey, and thank you, Michael, and thank you everybody for participating with us tonight. These are some really excellent questions. I do see another one here in the new that we can publish. It's also another landscaping question that, Michael, I would send over to you to answer. But please do keep them coming in. We're here till 8 o'clock. We're happy to answer anything. So while it's on me, I'll just read this one out. So Michael, we have a landscape architect working on, in part, grading to prevent further bowing to the original retaining wall and water intrusion in the garage. I think this person thinks that only the drainage grading French drain would be eligible. Would that work need a HOP? And if so, how does this person separate out that part of the plan?
So I think from what you've read, that would be eligible for the tax credit for the items you listed, for the retaining wall repairs, the French drain, and the site regrading to divert the water. That would be eligible. Again, we would ask for as much information about that as possible in your narrative and in your supporting documents, because generally hardscaping and landscaping are not eligible. So in that example, though, since it's an original retaining wall and the regrading is being done to prevent further damage to the foundation of the historic house, we would certainly consider it. So you would need to submit a complete application with plenty of supporting documents and a complete narrative, but I agree that that list would be eligible. As far as how you separate it out, I think that's really up to you. What we would ask, again, for that type of work, contact our office with a thorough email, or maybe even an application, submit it to us directly, a HOP application, with your proposal. So we can take a look as a team. We can determine if any review is needed by the HPC, or if this is something we can approve administratively, or perhaps as in-kind work. And we would provide you with an approval letter, and then you would submit that approval letter with your tax credit application. So I'm not entirely sure what you meant by separate the work out. Is that question related to separating the work, the expense totals when you submit the tax credit, or is that for the HOP? I was a little confused about that part. If we can have some clarification.
Well, unfortunately, we can't have our questioner unmute themselves and ask, but please, if that was your question, maybe you can follow up a little bit with the second question and we can help clarify that. I think that was, from my reading of the question, I think they were trying to parse out which of the work would be eligible for the tax credit, and then to make sure that the project as a whole would require HOP, which I think you've answered. Yeah,
and I think just to add to that, if that is in fact the question that they're asking, itemized receipts and invoices from your contractors, where you highlight the items that are related to the tax credit eligible work, I should say. And then we do have the receipts transmittal form, where you on that form you can list the work that you're applying for that you find is eligible based upon our response to you, or perhaps from the list on our website. And then you would code that to the receipt. However you want to do that. You can just hand number the receipts 1, 2, and 3, or 1A, 1B, however that works best for you, and then enter that code into the receipts transmittal form so that we can easily find that information.
Great, thank you. So we are having a couple other questions come in, so thanks, folks. In restoring the exterior trim of a structure, can synthetic materials be used if matching the profiles?
For it to be in-kind work, technically it has to be in-kind. So wood for wood, stone for stone, brick for brick, things like that. If you do wish to use an alternative material, you can reach out to our office and let us know what you're proposing, and we'll take a look at it. Some alternative materials are better than others. Generally, if it's millable and paintable, there may not be too much of a difference, but we would like to take a look at exactly what you're proposing and provide some feedback before you conduct that work, because we just want to make sure that if you're doing this work to get the tax credit, that it is eligible. But to be on the safe side, in most cases, we would require in-kind, so wood for wood, brick for brick, etc.
Okay, great. So next question here. After our office, after the individual receives an approval letter from the Historic Preservation Office, should they expect another letter to come from the Montgomery County Department of Finance?
I believe that the Department of Finance does send out a letter indicating that, well, I'm not sure if it's a letter so much as just an adjusted property tax bill. Maybe I should back up for a moment. I think they send out an adjusted property tax bill, which when you see that adjustment, you should be aware of what that's for. I've never seen one personally, so I'm not sure how that what that bill looks like when it's adjusted, but I believe that's what they will send you. Not a letter, but an adjusted bill.
Okay, great. So next question here. Are we going to post a recording of the session tonight onto our website?
I think Rebecca answered that earlier, and yes, that's the intention.
Okay, great. So our questioner from earlier has followed up and said, yes, their landscaper is doing a lot of other work alongside those items. So they're just trying to understand how to parse through all of that.
Yeah, again, I think just an itemized invoice and itemized receipts from your contractor, if it's one contractor performing all of the work, so that just let the contractor know what your intention is to break down the work and submit some of it for the tax credit, and let them know that you need that invoice to be completely itemized. That should be all we need. Great,
thank you. So that was our final question. I'm going to try again. I'm going to hand it over to you, Rebecca, if you want to close us out. But if you have any questions, put them in the chat. We're still here.
Great, thank you, Casey. So again, thank you to everybody that's come out to participate tonight. I see we have over 40 questions in the chat, which is great. If there's something that wasn't answered here tonight, or this makes you think of more questions, there's never too many questions. Please get in touch with us. Get in touch with Michael. He is our tax credit coordinator. He is your point of contact. Kevin Manarola also goes through our general email box and can answer questions that people have about applying, about the program. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming out this evening. Again, thank you to Casey and to Kevin, our support team, and Michael for sharing his expertise with everybody here tonight. Again, we have until April 1st, the deadline for the tax credits. So please get in touch. We look forward to receiving your applications, and thank you to all of you for being such excellent stewards of Montgomery County's historic properties. We appreciate you as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.